The following half-hour show is a paid political program and is not endorsed by this station, management, or staff.
The following program is sponsored by Excalibur Insurance Management Services.
I'm sure you're all well aware by now of who Jim Bognet is. With all the TV ads you most certainly have seen. He is the Republican nominee for United States Congressman from the 8th Congressional District. This means he is taking on incumbent 5-term Democratic Congressman Matt Cartwright for the right to represent the 8th Congressional District in Washington. Jim was born and raised in Hazleton area and graduated from Hazleton Area High School, where he played football. Upon graduation, he went to the Pennsylvania State University, graduating with a degree in business administration, and from there went across the country to do postgraduate work at UCLA, where he received a master's degree in business administration. And from there, he went on to UCLA Law School, receiving his Juris Doctorate degree and becoming a lawyer. Jim has been very active in politics for a long time. First, working for United States Senator Rick Santorum, and then for United States Congressman Lou Barletta. Jim went on from there to have senior roles in 3 presidential campaigns. On this week's show, we will be discussing the recent debate and the issues that will decide this campaign.
This is the Volpe Report, a weekly news and political interview show examining the latest local, state, and national issues with Chuck Volpe. Insightful, informative, controversial, the area's premier political talk show, the Volpe Report.
Jim, welcome to the Volpe Report.
Thank you.
I should say welcome back. Obviously, we're at the home stretch now. The finish line, you've run a long race, and the finish line is a couple hundred yards ahead of you. How's the campaign going? Something I ask all candidates, and what are your thoughts about whether your momentum is building and how you feel your race is going?
Chuck, we feel fantastic. You know, back when I played football in high school, we talk about the 2-minute offense. We're in the final 2 minutes of the game.
Agreed.
The 2-minute warning's gone. We feel great. You know, the debate that we had really showed the differences between me and Matt Cartwright. It's tough. He's been in office for 10 years, and there's just not much to show for it. Just a record of voting with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden 100% of the time. And when you see where we are with this country, people are hungering for change. The economy's in bad shape. We're entering a recession. Inflation's out of control. Our seniors are suffering. And people all over Northeast Pennsylvania tell me it's time for a change, and we're going to bring that change to Washington.
Well, you have a tremendous, I believe, political advantage in a sense. Now, yes, you're running against a powerful incumbent who's in leadership and an appropriations chairman, of course. I'm sure he has been pushing that message. But having said that, you know, there's a lot of ways to kind of, to me, crystallize, almost black and white, even though we live in a gray world. There are very few times you can make black and white issues. Which is almost a cliche but true, every one of those indicators bodes bad for him in the sense that he's a Democrat, and bodes bad for the Democrats. And worse for Democrats that have been part of what I'll say this progressive takeover of the Democratic Party. To your point, he's voted with Pelosi and Biden 100% of the time. I don't think all during this thing, I don't know how that plays in a district that, for example, President Trump won twice, this district. And so I would have thought that he would have had to go more to the center, that he would have had to represent the constituents and the beliefs in this district, that he would have to vote against them on critical issues, whether on things that were affecting our economy, whether it was shutting down all oil and natural gas, things we have in abundance in Pennsylvania that are important, whether it's supporting some of the farther out theories, whether it's the critical race, what they're trying to do to Title IX with gender is offensive to people, the way they've taken away parents' rights. And honestly, I thought that he would have moved to the center and opposed those radical cultural war issues. And but to your point, look, it is what it is. He's kind of made that bed now, and now he has to sleep in it. And
Well, I don't even look at it as Democrat versus Republican. I look at it as the average normal working person here in Northeast Pennsylvania versus the liberals. The people here in Northeast Pennsylvania, we want to teach our kids the values that we were brought up on. Love God, hard work, love your family. Not these new age, teach sexuality to kids in elementary school, or critical race theory or transgender issues. We want good jobs at good wages. We want to have cheap gas and cheap fuel oil. And instead, Matt's gone off to Washington and voted with Pelosi 100% of the time to shut down pipelines, supported Biden on his war on the fossil fuel industry. And then what's really galling is he comes back here and he does a two-step. But we know he's voted with Pelosi and Biden 100% of the time, and they've been in charge now for 20 months. Right. Are things better now, Chuck, than they were 20 months ago?
Let's look at where we were back in 2020. We had the best economy, arguably, in the last 50 years at that time. We were an oil and fossil fuel and natural gas exporter. We were in a position to support our European allies in NATO and keep them strong, which is our best defense against the aggressions of a guy like Vladimir Putin. We were in a great position. We had interest rates. You can get a mortgage for your family at like 3.2%. Some were even 2.75, 15-year fixed. That was the economy, and that was the state of affairs, and that was the geopolitical balance. Now let's look 2 years later. Jim, it's a catastrophe. We have the highest inflation in 3 generations. We have untenable between energy prices and gas prices and food prices. Inflation has run amok. They said it's transitory. Well, that was a year ago, right. And it's still heading north. You look at immigration at the time. Trump had a policy they had to remain in Mexico, and you had very few people actually and legally coming into our country. Now they're coming across in truckloads. So pick a subject. I'm having trouble finding an issue that people care about. Crime is at record high for crime. And back to what you said earlier about children in school and teaching, they believe that the government has the ultimate right, even ahead of parents. They're not telling parents if they're giving gender ideology or gender affirming advice to people in K through 12. Pick a subject.
Well, I think a lot about our senior citizens. Could you imagine being a senior citizen on a fixed income sitting in Wilkes-Barre or Scranton? And in the last 2 years, your home heating oil has gone from somewhere in the $3 a gallon area to, in Honesdale the other day, we were paying $5.79 a gallon. We had one of our supporters call us. You look at prescription drugs, only gone up in price. And then you have Matt and Joe and Nancy, the dynamic trio over there. They passed what they called an Inflation Reduction Act, and the next month, inflation went up more. These people don't understand. They're very disconnected from you and I and the average working class person here in Northeast Pennsylvania. They believe that $6 trillion of government spending helps us. Guess what? That's what caused the inflation.
Of course.
From 2% to 8% in a year and a half. It's almost amazing that they could damage our country so much in such a short period of time. And, it was disheartening the other day, Chuck, in the debate. 10 years he's been in office. And he's railing about the state of the country. But it was Matt's responsibility to make it better. And instead, he's made it worse.
I guess I grew up in a simpler time. God, apple pie, and Chevrolet time. At a time when our presidents concluded almost every set of remarks to the American people with, God bless America and God bless you.
Right.
Apparently God doesn't matter anymore or exist. And all of that. Someone once said, when you stop hearing sir and ma'am from children to adults, not much good can come from it, and that's where this country has gone. They've actually pitted children against their parents in their own household. That's what the progressive Democrats that are running this country have done.
I think a lot about my grandfather, who I talked about in the debate. He was born Vincenzo.
Was he the one that was going to hit you with the shovel?
That's right. That's right.
I love the commercial, by the way.
He was born Vincenzo Bugiccio in Italy. He came here in 1911. He only had an 8th grade education, but he went to work in the mines. He worked in the mines for 50 years. He had 11 children, 9 of them survived past infanthood, and all he cared about was making sure his kids worked hard, loved God, and loved their country, and were a net benefit for their community. And that's what the American dream was, and to be left alone by the government in Washington, D.C. Now, the government wants to tell you how to teach your kids. They want to tell you to be woke. He wouldn't have understood what woke was about. He wouldn't have understood any of these things. And I worry that our politicians, I'll take, for example, defund the police. If defund the police would have came up in front of my grandfather, he wouldn't he would have walked out the door. He wouldn't even had the conversation. The shovel might have came back out. And now we have, Matt Cartwright, Nancy Pelosi, and Joe Biden seeming to stand aside and blame the police when there's issues in our cities. And there are issues in our cities. Crime is on the rampage in Philadelphia and New York. We have to get away from this defund the police mindset. That's why I'm really proud to be endorsed by every major law enforcement group in Northeast Pennsylvania. Think about that, Chuck. They had a choice between me, somebody who wants change, and a 10-year incumbent. And every law enforcement group chose me, because Mr. Cartwright did not stand with them when they were in a tough spot in the summer of 2020 when Antifa was burning the country down. If we keep going down this progressive mine shaft, when Matt stands with Cori Bush and AOC and Ilhan Omar and these people, Matt votes with them all the time. And they have come out and said they want to defund the police. Right. They think that the police are the problem, not the criminals. When Matt Cartwright got on stage and hugged John Fetterman is the most coddled criminal politician I've ever seen.
Agreed.
And Matt got on stage and endorsed him, and he endorsed Matt. That's the direction they want to take Northeast Pennsylvania. It's not the direction I want to take it, not the direction you want to take it,
kidding.
And not the direction the voters want to take it.
No, my audience knows pretty clearly, I'm sure, where I stand, and you're hearing it come out now. And I feel I have an obligation to speak what I believe in my heart to be true. And I, like you, was raised with good parents and was raised in a culture that I believed in. And the culture now is not something that I would be proud to say is something that we should be boasting about as Americans. The government, and this is the progressive goal. That's what's scary. The progressive goal is that the elite, mostly Democratic, elite government bureaucracy, with their, quote, following the science and following the statistics, and they're more qualified than regular Americans that aren't as sophisticated or as highly educated as them, to tell you how to live your life, to tell you what freedoms you should have. So that is, to me, fundamentally an anathema to what our founders intended. Our founders intended that you were born into this world with natural God-given rights that no government has any business infringing upon. Government's role is to protect those God-given natural rights. Instead, Jim, we've gone off the rail to the point that government has replaced, almost like a pagan god, that's where your rights come from, and a good government will protect you and take care of you as long as you do everything they say, of course.
Well, I think you really put your finger on it, and that's why we need to return to the traditional values. But, while they're telling us what they think we should do, the culture of corruption in Washington gets worse and worse. When Nancy Pelosi was elected to Congress in 1987, she was worth a few $1 million. Now she's worth $200 million. When Mr. Cartwright was elected 10 years ago, he was worth $1 million or $2 million. Now he's worth almost $20 million. I think the people of Northeast Pennsylvania are sick and tired of politicians getting rich where they're struggling to pay for groceries and gas and medicine they need. So we need to change D.C. We need to change the culture. I make a promise that I will go down there and shake things up and try to change the culture.
Well, that's a perfect time to take our mid-show break, Jim. And actually, I think we are having a spot that you've given the station to run. We're going to run it on our show, and we'll let the folks see that. Again, we're here today with Republican nominee for United States Congress in the 8th Congressional District, Jim Bognet, a veteran of these wars, having run 2 years ago and lost in a photo finish. He feels pretty strongly with the momentum he has generated and the negative momentum the country is currently facing, that he has a great chance to win this election. And when we come back, we'll let him continue to talk to you about why he thinks there should be change and why he should be the person to lead that change from Northeast and Central Pennsylvania. We'll be back after this message.
Gas back to $4 a gallon.
Matt Cartwright votes with Joe Biden 100% of the time.
Home heating oil almost $6.
Matt Cartwright votes with Joe Biden 100% of the time.
Grocery prices up. Inflation a new record.
But Matt Cartwright votes with Joe Biden 100% of the time.
Jim Bognet will stop inflation, protect Social Security, and stand up to Biden.
I'm Jim Bognet, and I approve this message. Let's take Pennsylvania in a different direction.
Welcome back. We're here again today with United States congressional candidate Jim Bognet for the 8th Congressional District, which covers all this media market covers the whole congressional district. So he is speaking to voters that will vote in November 8th's election. And Jim, I think we kind of touched on it, but one of the highlights of every campaign is a televised debate, and you had that. So I'm going to tell you, and I'll do it on camera because I'm telling the truth, and this is what I've heard, that there's never a winner per se in a debate. No one ever votes on that. So it's left to the ether and to the kind of perception as to who won. But by all accounts, I think that they felt that Matt, having been a very proficient trial lawyer, although you are a lawyer as well, but his reputation as a very proficient trial lawyer and having been an incumbent for 10 years would have given him a pretty natural, a sizable advantage going into that debate. Well, most of the people that weigh in with me and give me their thoughts and opinions, and I'm talking about people that follow politics, people that know how it works, it was almost unanimous that you won, and not particularly close. Not in a sense that, again, there's any way to prove that. It's just a matter of what people were saying. But by the same token, in the famous first ever nationally televised debate for president, John F. Kennedy debated Richard Nixon. And most people and political scientists point to that debate to change the outcome of that race. The way the two of them appeared changed the perceptions of Kennedy completely, and also Nixon, and not necessarily in a good way. And while some said it was too close to call, it was clear without any official way to determine it. It was pretty clear John Kennedy won that debate. That's kind of what I've heard. So kind of walk us through, some of the highlights for the people in our audience that didn't see the debate. Well,
it was a great debate. I wanted to have 5 of them. Mr. Cartwright agreed to 1. I thanked him for doing 1. I don't think he's happy he did that 1 debate. It's just he has a very hard record to defend. He knows, and the people know, and I pointed it out multiple times, him and his best friend Joe Biden have really put this country into a ditch. So in the debate, every time we tried to talk about that, Matt wanted to run away from it. But Matt has to take responsibility that he supported the Biden-Pelosi liberal agenda 100% of the time. So that, what we heard coming out of the debate is people were just kind of shocked at some of the things he said. Mr. Cartwright put a man wearing a MAGA hat in one of his commercials. And when I confronted him about that, he said, well, Donald Trump had some good things about him. I said, you voted to impeach him twice. He said he had it coming. My head was spinning. He was all over the place on President Trump, but, I just repeated what President Trump said. Matt Cartwright's horrible on the border, and it's been a disaster for our country. Secondly, the closing argument. Mr. Cartwright used the whole closing argument to attack me. He never turned to the camera and said, please vote for me, and explained why he wants to go back to Congress. He just viciously attacked me. And, the thing that I think really crystallized it for people was when I pulled out, he attacked me, and I pulled out a flyer. Nancy Pelosi is his #1 donor. She was having a big fundraiser for him with out-of-state liberal people the next day. Wow. And I pulled that out and I showed that to people, and we got hundreds of phone calls. People were shocked. I think until they saw the flyer on TV, they didn't realize Matt Cartwright, all his campaign of lies against me, is funded by Nancy Pelosi and out-of-state liberal donors. People in Northeast Pennsylvania are smart. They can look at the TV ads. They look at us debate. They get a pretty good sense of who we are as people and what we believe in. And they know I represent change, and Matt Cartwright represents Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. We have an open, festering sore at our southern border. Immigration is right now, I won't say destroying our country, because unfortunately for the national Democrats, I'm careful always to say, there's a lot of good Democrats that will probably, by the way, be voting for you. I was one for 45 years, but I refer to the progressive radical Democrats that hijacked the Democratic Party. They're running things now. So those Democrats I'm talking to. Well, again, what's been done at the border is nothing short of a catastrophe. And we now have a situation where they've been shipped. I've done 2 views, 1 view specifically on ghost flights, where they were, according to the Biden's State Department, they were basically shipping these people all over the place, and they were landing at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, and then being dispersed with buses waiting for them, distributed out into communities. People don't even know they're there. I can't even make it up. But let's talk about that. Wall Street Journal, front page, Monday of this past week, talked about my race against Mr. Cartwright in the frame of illegal immigration. illegal immigration has devastated parts of Wilkes-Barre, has devastated my hometown of Hazleton, Pennsylvania. The drugs, the crime, the cartels, the human trafficking that's been brought along with this surge of illegal immigrants into our area is not good. Mr. Cartwright defends it. Mr. Cartwright did nothing when they were doing these ghost flights. In fact, when he was interviewed about the ghost flight on last Christmas, he said this is standard operating procedure, as if we should accept this, that it's just standard that 200 illegal immigrants were flown from Texas here to our area. We must secure the border. President Trump came up with the great idea of a border wall. I support the border wall. Mr. Cartwright voted against funding for the border wall. I support the Remain in Mexico policy for illegal immigrants, why their cases are adjudicated. Mr. Cartwright supports catch and release. Mr. Cartwright supports sanctuary cities. I oppose sanctuary cities. On this issue, it's very clear. If you think illegal immigration is wrong, you should support me. If you think illegal immigration is just fine, you should support Matt Cartwright.
I look at what the Democratic progressive mayors and Democratic district attorneys across this country in those cities, they've destroyed cities. We've talked about Los Angeles, Democratic mayor, Democratic governor Gavin Newsom, who was recalled by his own people, by the way. He won the recall, but they had 2 million plus signatures to get him recalled. Chesa Boudin, the district attorney of San Francisco, was recalled and kicked out of office in the middle of his term because they've turned San Francisco, Michael Schellenberger referred to it, into a drug encampment, into a place where looting is in the middle of the day. Police don't enforce it. You look at some of the sanctuary cities, you look at Philadelphia right here in Pennsylvania, what District Attorney Larry Krasner has done, destroyed that city. It took an African-American mayor, Michael Nutter, the former mayor of Philadelphia, to come out and say, and basically call Krasner a white, woke, pathetic law enforcement official. That black lives and brown lives were being killed on the streets of Philadelphia. They had record crime rates. So let's talk about that issue.
Crime is out of control in our big cities. We know it. We've seen it. Every night you can turn on the Philly news and see people shot in the head and carjacked. It's horrible. And we have just seen the phrase defund the police never existed before 2020. And you know who brought it into being? The liberal progressive Democrats that Matt Cartwright stands with. We've seen him get mixed up with people who think we should defund the police. If you are against funding our hero law enforcement officers, in my view, you're pro-crime. And I will never stand for that. I am so blessed, I'm proud to be endorsed by the Pennsylvania State Troopers Association, all the local FOP lodges, the correctional officers. They've stood with me because they know I will stand with them. When it's a choice between supporting the police and the criminals, we must support our police. And listen, we got to crack down on fentanyl. Fentanyl is killing people. I did an event the other day, 100 people. I said, everybody here who's lost someone to an overdose, raise their hand. I raised my hand. 85% of the room raised their hand. This drug is being put into our communities. It's poisoning our children. It's killing people left and right, and nothing's been done to stop it. We must take this seriously. We must have a concerted effort to stop this, and it starts with cutting down on illegal immigration, which is going to stop the cartels from coming here, but we need more aggression going after these people. We can't stand for our children being killed, and I won't stand for it.
We have a catastrophe in this country right now relative to the climate apocalyptic radical lunatics that have again somehow gotten a position of control in the Democratic Party. Joe Biden's first acts when he became president were to shut down the Keystone XL pipeline, stop all drilling and fracking on federal lands. Their Treasury Department has disincentivized banks and made it punitive for them with penalties to invest in fossil fuel projects and fossil fuel drilling. And then says, oh, well, it's the greedy oil companies that put us in the predicament. Again, you just hope people know the lies. Just like they treat people like they're sheep, that they're not capable of understanding issues. They do understand. But at any rate, pick something on energy.
Well, let's talk about the Green Raw deal. I mean, Matt Cartwright and AOC and these progressives have supported the Green New Deal. I call it the Green Raw deal because it's a raw deal for Northeast Pennsylvania consumers. That's what's put gas up through the roof. They went after American oil drilling. Pennsylvania could heat and power the whole East Coast. But guys like Matt Cartwright and Joe Biden are against fossil fuels. They say things like, go buy a Lexus. Or not a Lexus, go buy a Tesla, excuse me. We can't afford a Tesla. That's crazy. But here's the big thing. They don't practice what they preach. I'm all for conserving the environment. We love the environment up here. We have the most beautiful area of the country. Matt Cartwright flies a private jet back and forth to Washington, D.C. That has the emissions of over 100 cars. He emits more carbon gases than if he drove a car, 100 cars down there. And then we say, Matt, if you really believe in helping the environment, why don't you park your private jet? But guess what, Chuck? I'm going to park his private jet when I beat him on November 8th.
Yeah, well, again, good answer. That has ancillary and collateral damage, that subject we just talked about, and you just answered the question. But let's turn our attention to how it's destabilized the geopolitical balance. You know, I was predicting on this show a year in advance what the dangers we were flirting with in terms of our energy policy, because if they could get, meaning the European continent and all of our NATO allies, if they can get their energy from the United States, as they always had when their supplies were low, I mean, that's the way it should be. You're in an alliance with a lot of free countries that believe in the things we do. Well, when we shut everything down, when we turned the United States, when Biden took over, into an oil importer instead of exporter, the collateral damage was all of those European NATO allies of ours were on bended knee to Vladimir Putin for Russian oil and gas. Americans want an abundant future, not a completely green one. So your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, as we've seen the geopolitics deteriorate over the last 2 years, one thing that continually I think about is how we broadcast weakness. When Mr. Biden took office, and you know, Matt Cartwright was his biggest supporter here, they campaigned together, he opened the border. That, you know, broadcast weakness to people coming into our country. He did not acquit himself well in Afghanistan. We lost 13 heroes over there in his botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Cut and run, leave $80 billion of equipment in Afghanistan. That said to Vladimir Putin, he won't do anything when you invade. So here's what I worry about. China. I believe the Chinese Communist Party is the #1 threat to the safety and security of the world. I believe that they are an aggressive, mercantilist country. I believe they've screwed us on trade. They've taken manufacturing jobs. And I believe they want to invade Taiwan. If we don't have strong leadership in Washington, we could end up in World War III. And I worry about that all the time. I think we have to make China pay for what they did to us. I think the only thing they respect is strength. So we better turn this country around. And when I'm in Congress in 2 months, part of a new conservative majority, we are going to make sure that we could stand up to China in the Pacific. And we are going to make sure that Joe Biden doesn't get us into World War III.
Well stated. Sadly, Jim, we're out of time, but I wanted to save at least 30 seconds to a minute. Do you talk to that camera, talk right to people, and tell them why they should vote for you?
Well, I just appreciate the opportunity, Chuck, to talk to the voters. You know, if you're a senior citizen sitting here in Northeast Pennsylvania, if you're a family of 4 and your kids go to school, if you think this country deserves where we are at, if you think that we're in a good spot, maybe you should consider voting for my opponent. But if you think we're in a ditch, if you think we've gotten off track, if you think we deserve better and we need change, if you want a brighter future for your kids and more great jobs here in Northeast Pennsylvania, if you want to return to the values that have made us the greatest country in the world, I would ask you to look at me, give me a vote. I promise you, when I go to Washington, we will shake things up and we will change this country.
Well stated, Jim. Well done.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Again, we are here today with Republican nominee for United States Congress in the 8th Congressional District, Jim Bognet. He has made a very impassioned and eloquent case to be our next congressman. That'll be up to you, folks. That's the great thing about this country, that we get to decide who our elected officials are. This is an important election this coming November 8th, one of the most important ones I'll say in my lifetime, based on a fundamental difference between the Republicans and the Democrats about the future this country needs to go in and the path it is currently on. So having said that, we'll be back again next Sunday at 10:30 to have another guest to talk to you about the November 8th elections and their importance to the future of the country. We'll see you then.